Then sight reading procedures. We have everything I'm talking about is a huge segment of the manual. Sight reading procedures. Now, it's been very good. Carole and I have had a 32-year run of doing more than music. We met in 1974 and we clicked immediately. We met at a Suzuki conference and everybody was going around looking very reverent, and she and I went and drank Cokes in the Pizza Hut and told jokes. We knew we were going to have a good friendship. And we love and respect and adore everything about Dr. Suzuki, but we couldn't take too much earnestness. We're not that kind of person. Anyway, so the lovely thing is that our skills seem to be so complementary. She is one of the best sight readers I have ever met on the planet. You are looking at, formerly I would like to say, the world's worst sight reader. It was such a nightmare for me with sight reading that if anybody mentioned the word sight reading, even if it was a piece that I could have easily done, the fact that they said sight read this was enough to make my head go, and I couldn't do it. I'm paralyzed with it. And always you're struggling. Why couldn't I sight read? Why was it so terrible? Why was it such a problem? All this stuff. Well, eventually I came across a book called Piano Guided Sight Reading by a man named Lloyd-Watts. And for years it was out of print. And I see that it has been put back into print again. It's a very interesting book.
What is that called again? Could you repeat
Piano Guided Sight Reading by Lloyd-Watts. You don't really need to buy it because I'll tell you the nubbin of it anyway, but for your own interest, if you want to buy it, I encourage you to do so. There were some aspects of it that I didn't think were helpful. The nugget that was so useful to me was the notion of reading slowly enough so that you could identify every note accurately, and that you combined that with counting. In his system, it was a very flexible counting, so you would start off at a reasonable pace that you could play the piece. It was 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you hit a more complex segment where you were having to figure out notes a little bit more, always reading from the bottom up and reading every note exactly as it's printed on the page as accurately as you can. And if it's not right, if you hit a wrong note, you correct it. So then you might be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and so flexibility, but the goal is to read accurately. The revelation of that was that it doesn't take very long at all before your eye is picking it up quicker and quicker. It's the experience of reading accurately that was something that was terribly important for me. And Carole was lucky enough to have in her background a teacher who made her count out loud all the time. We will now have a solemn pledge. I will now force all my students to count out. They don't like doing that. It's a hard sell. How many have had a hard time getting their students to count out loud? Mm-hmm. Yeah, welcome to the club. We're all in the same club on that one. Here's a suggestion for you that has been helpful for me, because what do they say to you? They say, I can't count and play at the same time. And in my ignorant youth, I would say to them, trying to be helpful, well, that's all right, honey. You play and I'll count. Well, that was okay up to a point, and then I realized, gee, am I ever good at counting out loud? I could count like a son of a gun. Everything, really good. And they weren't getting any better at all. And then one day the penny dropped. I thought, I'm missing half of the equation. So the next time it came up, and they said, I can't count, play at the same time. That's fine, honey. You play and I'll count. And we did that. And I said, and now I'll play and you count. It works like a dream. So now they can do both halves of the equation, and you just keep them doing it, and eventually they can do the counting and the playing at the same time. Thank you, Betsy. So, on your handout, you have a sight reading checklist. Do I love this sight reading checklist? Of course, because I wrote it. It's really a valuable document here. And of course, I happen to write it out, but it is in conjunction with the work that Carole and I developed together. Now, here's my copy of the sight reading checklist. Let's put this up. So, this came about because, of course, Carole didn't need a sight reading checklist. She already knew how to do it perfectly, beautifully, brilliantly. Here's Valery struggling away, wondering why I don't know how to do it. How can I help my students do it better? So one September before starting teaching, I'm sitting there thinking, what is it that Carole does? Or what is it that any magnificent sight reader does? And why are they so good and I'm so terrible? And I'd had another experience too. A wonderful composer, Clifford Crawley, had composed a piece for me called La Ficelle d'Or. And I said to him, Cliff, you got to send me something that I can hear how this goes, how you anticipate this going, because reading handwritten script on something you've never heard before, and it's all contemporary, and it's pretty hard to make head or tail of it. And then you think, oh my gosh, I got to put in all this work to learn it before I know if I even like it. So his own playing ability he felt was not up to snuff, so he asked his wife, who is an amazing sight reader, to read it. She sits down and she takes this piece that took me 6 months to learn, and she played it through, virtually at tempo. And I said to Clifford, how did she do that? He said, I don't know. She just gets this look on her face and she starts to play. So I talked to her some months later and I said, Deb, how does this happen? How are you such a fabulous sight reader? She said, well, I don't really know. All I remember is that when I was growing up, my sister, who was 2 years older than I was learning, and of course little sisters want to outdo their big sisters, so she was trying madly to catch up with and overtake her big sister. To slow her down, she said they gave me 50 books at level 1 and 50 books at level 2. So she thought she was getting all this wonderful stuff, but she wasn't able to overtake her sister. There is a lesson in this for all of us. I know that as a teacher, I don't keep my children on the same level nearly long enough for them to become experienced and confident at that level. We tend to think, oh, well, they know how to do that, and you move on to the next level. They need a lot of integration of it. So that was one of the things. That's not on that checklist. But to come back to the checklist, I sat there and I said, what is it that a great sight reader does? What a great sight reader does is put the music up, and they look at it, and in less time than you can articulate it, they've gone, and they're with their eyes, they have scooped up an enormous amount of information. What is that information? Well, first off, it's what clefs are they written in, because inexperienced students, especially if they see 2 treble clefs, will read treble and bass clef. So they've looked at the clefs. They've looked at the key signature. Now they are so experienced, they already know their scales. You say A major to them, they can immediately do that.